So on January 12th, 2026, Anthropic launched an AI agent platform called Cowork. And within days, it triggered one of the most dramatic sell-offs the software industry has ever seen, with JPMorgan's US software index dropping 18% year to date, and giants like Oracle, Adobe, Salesforce, SAP, and even Microsoft getting crushed. And the panic is rooted in a simple realization. If AI agents can now handle entire business workflows, so that includes legal reviews, data analysis, marketing automation, meeting prep, then companies don't need 10 software licenses for 10 employees anymore. And the entire SaaS business model that's printed money for 2 decades starts to sort of break. And a new term has emerged from the wreckage, service as a software. Instead of buying tools and hiring humans to run them, you just buy the outcome directly. And the contradictions are wild. Software stocks are at 10-year low valuations, while their actual fundamentals are still strong, but investors are pricing in a future where the model collapses and nobody wants to be the last one holding the bag. Would you say that's an accurate summary of that?
It is. It is. And I think it's, if I want to work back to the fundamentals, right? If you look at an average brick and mortar business, right? When you go to value that business, you give it a 2 to 3x multiple. And then you go to SaaS that, in a previous point in time, SaaS was something like 10 to 20 times multiple. It came down after that to something like now it's in the range of 3 to 10 times revenue multiple in terms of buying a SaaS. And if you are a VC or a PE, the whole thesis was the promise of SaaS is that you host this platform once, and then there is always a tiny incremental cost to service one more customer and another customer and another customer. And if we want to kind of break down a SaaS and look at it a little bit under the hood, because I think it's helpful and relevant to do so to understand why this is such a big deal and what's changing, that you look at and you realize that pretty much every piece of software built in the SaaS 2.0 paradigm was, we have a UI presentation layer that shows you reports, that opened forms, that open screens, you fill those screens, you walk through Wizard, we surface some data for you. That's the UI or presentation layer. Then the secret sauce, the juicy layer, has always been the business logic layer. It's essentially all the formulas, all the equations. It's also the business processes that, once the order comes in, here's what we do, here's the inventory we check, etc., etc. And then you have finally a data layer, right? Where all the data eventually sits, and that's usually a database, a data lake, a big data, a Hadoop. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant for this part of the convo. Now, what we're seeing is that in that old generation, every time reality changed, your business changed, you had to go back to your IT teams and, hey, we need to change the software now because the rules of the business have changed, and the IT teams, and so you went through, a sprint, an iteration, a waterfall, whatever it took for you to make the change to the software, deploy that change to the software, and life goes on. And that cycle was always like rinse and repeat. And so in a sense, a SaaS is nothing but a presentation layer, a bunch of business rules and workflows, and then the data. Now, enters AI agents, and they change that landscape drastically. Let's take the example of a CRM, right? So if we look at the CRM previously, let's take HubSpot, an example that saw a ridiculous drop in value. When I used HubSpot as my CRM, of course, my salespeople were on it. My marketing was also involved in it. But for the most part, every time one of my sales team members use HubSpot, it's either to fetch a data, to fetch some report, or, God forbid, update the lead status, right? And this update happened based on the prospect having a conversation online or offline my sales rep having that conversation online or offline with a prospect. Now, enter the realm of AI agents. Agents are really good at reading emails or meeting summaries and updating the CRM automatically. And therefore, that screen in the CRM is no longer relevant, right? My sales rep entering the data into the CRM is no longer relevant. And so what has been happening slowly is that the business rules are migrating away to some extent from what the old SaaS had as what we call the business logic layer, and they're slowly becoming more embedded in the agentic layer. And so now the argument becomes, if the business rules are now moving to the agentic layer, and guess what? The agentic layer is actually much easier to change, because to change behavior in the old days, I had to go through a dev cycle. To change behavior in the new day, I'm probably changing a prompt or adding a rule document. That's it. So even for me as a SaaS CTO, if of someone building any sort of product, it doesn't matter, you want to call it SaaS or whatever, there is no reason for me anymore to hard code rules in code, because there's so many aspects of the business that change as the market changes, as the niche change, as the condition change. And so it's going to be much faster for me to do this in the agentic layer. But then that automatically begs the question, if all my business rules are migrating here, this is no longer required. Of course, it's going to happen slowly, but then wait. So are you saying I'm just paying HubSpot to be a very expensive database that I pay per license on? Damn, that's bad, right? And I think what we're seeing right now is that picture, is that, hey, now all I need is a database or my current data sources and an agent, and the agent will apply the business rule. And guess what? The agent is really good at surfacing text tables, and when required, I don't see it impossible for the agent to produce a UI unique to this problem to show me the data around it, or one of the pre-canned screens. And this argument is solid, right? Now, this definitely changes things, right? I believe, and I'll go on record to say, that SaaS valuations will drop, right? I think that's a reality, yes. However, you cannot throw the baby with the bathwater, because one of the powerful things, right? Like you made the argument that, hey, I can build this in-house, right? This is the argument, is that I can build this with an agentic layer and I can build it in-house. However, you're missing the fact that there is more there. There is more in the SaaS stack than meets the eye, right? And a good example of that is, and so if I'm a SaaS provider and I unpack my SaaS layer, I will find, or my business logic layer, I will find that there is a lot of business logic rules that are related to this particular customer, right? If BitLab or if Caesar Health was a customer of HubSpot, there is probably in HubSpot workflows that describe how we engage, on the SDR side of things. We might have SMS automation things. We might have email campaigns. And so there's a lot of this that is special and private to my organization. Wonderful. And then there is some standard business domain things, right? If I want to calculate tax, VAT, HST, Europe's sales tax, those are not my business formulas or equations. These are pretty standard in either industry things, country-specific things, province, locality-specific things. There are business rules that are generic, but have to apply in that context. But then I would say, if you are to survive as a SaaS, if you want to succeed as a SaaS, the days of you offering this and this alone and having the impression you're creating value, that's no more. Yes. Mm-hmm. However, there is one extra thing that you as a SaaS provider have that no one else have: access to data for that business domain, but from different customers. That, right? If I'm Coca-Cola, I only see Coca-Cola's data. If I'm Pepsi, I only see Pepsi's data. However, what's powerful is HubSpot that can see Coca-Cola and Pepsi. However, as HubSpot, you cannot share this data freely between Pepsi and Coca-Cola. That'd be really bad. However, you as HubSpot is in a unique place to run industry-level insights. to compare my metrics to other competitors, to compare it to averages. So there is still value that will accrue in SaaS beyond that, right? And this is what I'm calling the secret sauce layer, right?
Is that the main part of the moat?
No, I don't think so. I think the moat of the next SaaS is something we will have to now innovate on. We've been sitting on our laurels for too long on SaaS, because more or less you build some CRUDs. And when I talk about CRUDs, it's like, how do I store data? How do I retrieve data? How can I update it? And how can I delete it? Most of the SaaS was CRUDs and business rules, right? Now that no longer cuts it. Now you want the deep analysis. Now you want the deep insights. Now I want competitive edge. So it's on the SaaS providers now to look at how do we look across the industry, across our customer subsegments, and through better analysis and through better modeling of what we have, can we offer new insights? Can we offer competitive advantage to customers? Now, there's also good and bad, because now that competitive advantage has to be also tailored to the customer's context of this current customer. And I think that's part of it. Also, keep in mind the fact that you can build, like the other argument in favor of SaaS is, absolutely, you can build all of these workflows in-house, right? Can you build an accounting system in-house? Absolutely. And, would Claude make it 50% cheaper and easier to build an accounting software? Yes. But guess what? The accounting industry is changing. The tax rules are changing. There's so much change that if you are to build it in-house now, you need a team to maintain it and support it and. And this value still has to accrue to SaaS. I don't see this value going to Claude or anyone else, unless this is really your team just changing prompts. But there's definitely more than that. And so that's what it is. But I think the other interesting things to consider here is I do not believe it's one agent, right? This is not Claude's going to be taking all. I think it's still going to be, the future is going to be multi-agentic. And I think agent discovery and agent registry becomes a critical part of every organization. And it's essentially a place where every agent, if I have a sales agent, right, it has access to sales data. Marketing agent has access to the marketing data. Operations agent is looking after operations. But then if the sales agent has a product question, it needs to know who to go ask next.
It's multi-agent, but wouldn't there be one LLM to rule them all?
And yes, but there's not just the LLM. So can it be one LLM to rule them all? Yes, potentially. In fact, you could argue that all of these agents are all using, Claude, OpenAI, Kimi. Name your agent of the day. I don't think that's what matters. I think what matters in this new world order more, I think if you're in the engineering side, if you're on the AI side, we are talking about context engineering is the big thing. And I think context engineering in this global scope and the way things are changing is the only king.
What is context engineering?
Okay. When I want to feed something to the LLM, obviously, currently, when you engage with GPT has your Google Drive, right? And maybe your Google Drive at best have 200 documents. But now let's consider the same GPT in a 100,000 people company, which has probably 1,000 departments, right? How much time is it going to take GPT to find the right piece of information? Right? And where is it? In which department? In which organization? In which database? If you go into any large corporation, there's at least 20 to 30, 50 departments. There's hundreds of systems. There's systems that manage systems. There's registries of systems. And so when you're looking at that scale, this is a much bigger problem. And context engineering, the way I'm going to define it here, is that the data historically, one disservice, there's one bad thing that SaaS did to every organization. And that big disservice is that every SaaS was a silo. So your CRM was a silo and you have it alone. And your billing system was a silo and you had it alone. And so you as an organization, there's no integrations between them. But then you as an organization, that was your mission. Your mission is to basically now go create a data lake, funnel all the sales data, marketing data, billing data, to create what we used to call, or what we call, the 360-degree view of the customer. That for me to understand the customer, I want to know their user experience, their customer experience, their, are we overcharging them on the billing? Are we undercharging them? Are we giving them the right promos? All of these are aspects of running the business, but they're just different aspects. And to say that Claude is going to do it all, or Claude is going to create enough of experiences or skills to rule it all, to me is, one, naive, and two, is basically like, there's still going to be innovation, right? I think, however, the innovation and the secret sauce will come from managing that context better. Here's what I'm going to call it. The company that will win in this coming generation is the one that is able to sift through. I think you could argue that Google does that to some extent, but essentially you want to be able to sift through mines and tons of internal data and surface only the most relevant pieces to answer the current query at hand. And this layer, though, is going to be a very interesting layer, because this layer built by a SaaS vendor is a moat, but essentially this layer built by a SaaS vendor, to me as a company, is lockdown, as vendor lock-in. Because this layer has an understanding of my business and where does data reside and what kind of data it is. It's a data catalog, in essence, to some extent.
Mind drawing out the moat in its priority, similar to what you have right now on the screen. In the order of priority, what now comprises the moat with the SaaS-mageddon in place? So let's put it this way. Data currently remains the moat, right? So if you're a company, if you're a SaaS already that is sitting on a wealth of data, you already have moat, okay? But if data is the only moat, at some point your customer is going to email you and say, hey, I want to migrate off your platform. You're a very expensive database. I want my data out. Give me my data. That's a problem. So data is the first mode. But then the second mode is what I would call essentially, I'm going to call it secret sauce, okay? And because I don't think it's one thing. It's a form of value that you can get from aggregating all your customers' data. Aggregating, summarizing, finding insights. This could be like business intelligence insights. This could look different for different domains. So I don't want to necessarily kind of pigeonhole it into one thing, but it's this. The thing that one company cannot do versus a SaaS company that has a portfolio of customers can do is to look at across a portfolio. That is very valuable. That can give you industry level, right? Think of a good example of that is Carta publishing funding on startups. If you're a startup and run your own, can you run your own cap table management? Probably yes. You can probably run your own all of this, but you'll never get Carta's insights about your startup and how it compares to others who are in fundraising until you use Carta. Not affiliated with Carta, but essentially that's another example where it's the value is not just it's the data you brought, yes, it's the workflows you brought, but if I'm a SaaS and I want to survive in the new world order, I must find new forms of value. Now, here is a very interesting type of platforms that I think will continue to add value. Marketplaces, right? If you think about SaaS, there was always a subdivision of SaaS that's called marketplaces. And I think what we're about to see, though, is an explosion in agentic marketplaces. It's agent-to-agent commerce. I think it's going to be a very interesting use case that is yet to emerge. Now, if we go back to the moat, data is still a moat to some extent. Secret sauce, which is, let's call it data, insights, and aggregation, is another form of moat. But keep in mind, as I said, it's also
understanding and reacting to industry level changes is a moat, right? Again, good example, QuickBooks. Like there's 2 or 3 accounting software that rule the world for one good reason. Every time, IRS changes the tax laws, somebody has to be on top of that. CRA in Canada changes the tax laws, somebody has to be on top of that. And so there is always the understanding and reacting to industry level changes is something that's going to still continue to be a moat, right? And the final form of value is what I call the context engineering / context management layer, and I'm defining it as, how do I sift through, if I'm a really solid SaaS product, how can I sift through mountains of data and find and surface the most relevant pieces of data to service this agent question or query, which is ultimately driven by a user question or query. That's it. And so not all hope is lost, yes. Valuations for SaaS are going to drop. It's yes. SaaS should evolve, and SaaS is, and essentially here's the other thing. So let's talk about what the future of SaaS looks like. Anyone who's building SaaS in this shape, bro, I got news for you. You're old, you deserve to die. Anyone, the next SaaS layer looks more like this. There is data. There's the boring CRUD. Again, CRUD is how we retrieve data and update it, etc., etc. This is no innovation here. It's going to be there. It's going to be boring. It is what it is. But then, essentially, every SaaS will be rewritten as an agent that has access to a bunch of data and has access to a bunch of tools. And tools are interesting because tools could be, and we know this, right? LLMs are terrible at doing math. They're still terrible. They might still be, terrible in the very near future. However, every time I need to add 2 numbers or run a formula, I can just call some code, right? And what's even more interesting is, I think we are likely to see a future of self-building software where, through the user interacting with the agent, we might be missing a tool. And so the agent might go to another coding agent and whip a new tool on the fly. And now we just extended the software. Before, you had to have a team, do the release, do the product planning, do the release cycle, and do this. And now it's like, oh, just let's do a new tool. And now all of a sudden, this one tool added just gave me 30 new capabilities. It's gonna be a beautiful world to some extent. But as you can see, it's a paradigm shift. Like, I think we're barely scratching the surface on what's going to change. There's a lot more. We're just unpacking the first layer of it.
Would you say that the market's reaction with all these stocks going down like crazy, HubSpot, I think, is down around 79%. Do you think it's an overreaction? Or
of course.
Do you think it's
but
that's
justified?
Why we're going,
no, I think of course it's an overreaction, and there will be a course correction, but hey, if markets are never rational. And so this is an opportunity for anyone who thinks HubSpot is a great company. And by the way, big fan of Dharmesh Shah, their CTO, is brilliant. It's a good opportunity to go buy the dip. If you understand the fundamentals and you see that, I believe that SaaS is still here to stay. I don't think it's going to be game over for SaaS. I think, though, the game changed for SaaS. And if you're just still trying to build it the old way, I got news for you, bro. Sorry. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it.
What's the difference between software as a service and this new service as a software concept? And why should every founder and executive care about that distinction right now?
Because the old SaaS was me giving you a bunch of screens and you getting a bunch of your employees to update the screens. In the new SaaS, we don't need your employees to update anything, and the software is going to do all of that stuff, and therefore you're only gonna get the ultimate outcome of the software. Again, like when we set Anatoly to go buy the BitLab CRM, my plan wasn't like, I didn't buy the CRM because I wanted you and Benny to update the CRM. right? Or any of our sales people to update the CRM. But what I wanted was visibility into where are all my customers, at what stage of the cycle, of the kind of sales cycle they are, right? And so it's no longer about me buying seats for you and Benny. It's more, do I have a CRM that I can just plug it to the emails and you and Benny will continue to have the conversations? But you don't need the seats into the software. In fact, the software is running on autopilot. And I would argue that we're heading to a generation where we're actually also, the software or the SaaS that's going to win is not only kind of doing the job, it's actually shifting to it. It's going to anticipate what you're going to need next, and it's going to do it anyways. And by the time you come to the tool, it already gave you the answer. That's what's going to be possible in this next generation. As in, the tool knows that every Monday, Shoukri logs in to look at the sales number. And so every time Shoukri is going to come to the tool on Monday, or even better, every Monday at 9 a.m., the tool is going to be like, ding, hey, here is all the leads, here's all the lead status, here's the ones at risk, here's the deals you have to step into, and here's the deals that are humming along, and then you gotta go congratulate the team on. Done. That's what I want from a CRM. That's it.
It's one step ahead. It already knows what message to pre-draft 3 days after the meeting to schedule a follow-up or schedule a check-in, email, whatever it is. It's going to essentially do the job, and the human is just there to do the QA/QC factor of it.
QC or approval, right? Because it can draft and you have to approve, or it can fire and then later maybe again. If the way I think about it is, if the action can be undone, it should do it anyways. And then worst case, you say undo it because it's easier to do it that way. Or if the action is disruptive, like once you send that email, there is no take back. It's a draft that you fire. And whenever the AI has confidence enough, it should just take the action, is where I see this going.
The traditional SaaS model is built on per seat licensing. More employees is usually more revenue. If AI agents compress headcount, does the entire pricing logic of enterprise software just collapse? And is it shifting more so towards AI credits?
Well, I think we should always price on value. I think the whole idea of pricing per seat was interesting for that time, but I think we're going to have to shift to pricing it on outcome, on value, right? Example, if I can bring you a tool that will do the work of 20 sales reps, is it only fair to be, maybe compensated 10% of the salary of the 20 reps? Perhaps, yes. I think that's a new model. Forget, yes, we need the tokens concept because LLMs need tokens, and the reality at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay the LLM. Yes, somebody has to pay. But I think the more interesting is an outcome-based one. It's risk reversal. I think that'll be a very interesting sales model. In fact, I've heard rumors, and I don't know if this is news or rumors, where I think Claude or OpenAI were thinking, here's one for you to kind of struggle with a little bit. If you use OpenAI and you discover a new unique protein and you make a drug out of that and you sell that drug for $1 gazillion, does OpenAI deserve a cut?
They're trying to claim they do.
And I would argue they do. They went through the trouble of training this model and they brought it to you and they did all of these things. When it's not free, bro. Somebody has to pay for the billies, for all the billies that went to the training.
And Claude is making fun of OpenAI now for trying to be too money hungry with ad placements now within ChatGPT. And the sentiment, I think, is shifting more so towards Anthropic with all the news that have been coming out and with the hit that ChatGPT just took. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you know me. I've always loved Claude more, and we were using it probably when a lot of people were like, "Yeah, OpenAI is the best thing." I'm like, "No, Claude, you just don't know it yet." I love Claude for I think Sam Altman is damn brilliant. I like the Claude model is very similar to the Musk model, that we're going to charge more. Claude is more expensive, right? They're not going for the mass. Like OpenAI is the Facebook. OpenAI is the Facebook of the LLMs. It's like, hey, we're gonna make it cheap, we're gonna give it to everybody, but we're gonna mine a shit ton of data. Claude is the Claude is the kind of, the Apple version of this. Claude is gonna be like, hey, it's an enterprise product, you're gonna have to pay us more, but you're gonna get awesome value, and we're not gonna spam the shit out of you with ads. I like how that model resonates better.
Absolutely. What do you think new startup founders or new startups should do moving forward into this SaaS Mageddon? How can they survive, given that they probably don't have proprietary data, they probably don't have proprietary context as a derivative of that data? How and what should they do to survive and be profitable?
My article about parachute founders. I think this is the time, if you're a parachute founder, you're doomed. And a parachute founder is someone who's entering a space they don't understand. So we just established that the entire new game is the context engineering. It's the context. And the context is a function of your understanding of the industry and the organization or the customer you're going to be working with. And therefore, if I'm a founder, I would ask myself, where do I have, I think there is still a competitive advantage. It's in the founders that will kill it are those who sit high enough on the org chart, if they're currently in an organization, to see across and have a decent understanding of the business domain and the business context they solve. The more of that somebody has, the more of an unfair advantage, because they'll know what data to look for, where to go find it, almost from organization to organization. And this is coming, I'll give me as an example, not to self-promote, but I think it's interesting because once I walked between industries, now if you go into any telecom industry, yes, the systems might be different, the vendors might be different, but roughly there's certain things that are common in the stack. You need to have a billing system, you need to bill your customers, you need to have cell towers because you're a cell phone business. There's no walking into a cell phone business that has no cell towers. And so I guess, I lost the whole train of thought. What was the rant?
Will AI, what would be your recommendations for AI startups and new AI founders? How can they survive the SaaS Mageddon? You briefly touched on the fact that being a parachute, if you are a parachute founder, you will suffer a lot.
Yes. I think the founder, so first of all, what kind of founders will win? I think the kind of founders who will win are founders who understand the industry they work in much better than anyone else. Or to kind of also throw in Peter Thiel's, is you have to have an unfair advantage. And the unfair advantage can be simply a contrarian view. When everybody in the industry believes it's going X, you believe and have high conviction it's going to go Y. So you still have to have that conviction, or you have to have your own bet or contrarian bet about an industry or the direction things are going. That still has to be true. You still have to be knowledgeable enough, because the secret sauce is going to be the more you understand the data and where it comes from and what is the ultimate business outcome for it, you're going to be in the best position to execute, right? The landscape is changing. This time is unfortunately much more difficult than anything I've seen in my entire I've been in tech for more than 20 years. And this is different than anything else that I've seen before. The pace at which, our tooling as engineers are we are finding it difficult to catch up with engineering tooling. Can you imagine, right?
There's this game called agar.io, and it's essentially a bubble eats a smaller bubble. And I think we're approaching mid-game to end game, where we have all these big bubbles that are just swallowing up these tiny startups that are just breaking out. Prime example is what just happened with Anthropic. They release one version of their tool, just one iteration, and wipes out $500 million in market value.
I think what we're about to witness, I think what we're about to witness, you have to break it into market and how I think markets are going to evolve. Because I think there is, so now we talk kind of commercial side of things, right? And kind of game theory becomes something relevant here. the game of company against company or multiplayer game where one company changed pricing or changed features or feature parity, that game that played out in the current SaaS, where you have a thesis, you go build software that does it in a certain way, a competitor tries to differentiate on a set of other features, or. This game is going to continue to play, but this game is going to play at a velocity or speed unseen before. As in, Shoukri might launch a feature today, and Anatoly might be able to respond as soon as tomorrow. So the velocity at which change will happen will be like when an average team shipped once a month, when a really good team shipped once a day, now an average team can ship once a day, a really good team can ship multiple times per second. This is the pace that is possible now with agents, and we're very close. There's another holy shit moment that's about to come. It's this. What do you think is happening to the LLMs themselves? We are at a position where now the LLM is being trained by another LLM. So you have an LLM making an LLM, or an agent making an agent. And so what we're about to see is agent building agent. The new agent that's better now comes into that seat and builds another agent. And so essentially it's going to be parabolic.
Reciprocation. It's the reproduction.
But it's not reproduction though. It's exponential growth, because every agent, so you build a powerful agent times one, as it builds another agent, it builds the powerful times two. It's an exponential.
In an evolutionary way.
Yes, it's exponentially evolutionary. Yes. And so you have agent building better agent and a better agent building a better agent into infinity. And this we're about to take all the humans out of that loop. Wow.
It seems like it's very dangerous to be in the SaaS space right now. Would you say?
There's nowhere else to be. Every company is a software company. If you're not in the SaaS business, well, if you're in any business, you're in the software business. Whether you're a consumer of SaaS or producer of SaaS, you still have the same forces playing with you. Doesn't matter. Everybody's in the software business. There is no such thing as SaaS and no SaaS.
Because you got to have a level of SaaS in every business. Every business delivers some sort of digital service, which means you're running some sort of software. Very simple, right? And if you're not offering a digital service, even if you're running physical service, you still need the software to function. You need the basic, your accounting software, your payroll software, your banking software. Those are not going anywhere. AI come, AI go, tax man gonna get paid. People are going to pay their bills. You have to pay your dues. So these are basic software that every industry will continue to have. You need the database of customers. That's your CRM. You want to go fancy. You want to go HubSpot. You want to roll your own database. Sooner or later, you need it. But you also need it to talk to emails and to talk to SMS. Therefore, you still need, yes, everything changed, but to some extent, the capabilities that you have in your current CRM, whether you want to continue to use them in the current CRM or you want to build your own, you still need the same capabilities. The difference is not the core capabilities, right? Every CRM has to send SMS and receive SMS and know how to do stuff with it. But it's about where the rules sit, how fast you can change them. And that is, to me, that is really the biggest innovation. It's not anything else. Last question from my side. Or what kind of advice would you give a startup founder to survive the next year?
You need to get really good at context engineering, context management, and then you need to think about how you're going to build your product differently. And hey, dude, no surprise, we're building Caesar Health, we're building Content Stash, we're helping a lot of other startups who are our clients, and we're looking at it the same way. We're like, hey, it's just genuinely would Claude be a threat to Content Stash? If there's one world where yes, it is, but you and I know that we're thinking about what's going to give Content Stash an unfair advantage, and we're not going to say that here, but we're already thinking of what's going to make it a better thing. We know that data and data aggregation. Remember the SaaS play? Why I said yesterday when we were talking, I was saying profiles have to be global for that reason, because the value accrual that you cannot do on your own is mine every one of them. but maybe you don't need to mine all of them. You just need your competitors. But then there is value accrual for us to be able to understand once we have enough SaaS seats from B2B coaches and also B2B founders and SaaS founders and non-SaaS founders and AI founders and we also get to have a better picture of how algorithms operate across domains, across accounts, across. So there is still the value the aggregation aspect of this still in play for something like Content Stash, for something like Caesar too. And Caesar is a very special beast because it is the agentic layer meant to disrupt the existing EMR. So it's actually on freaking thesis. It's already secure when it comes to this world order because it is the agentic layer that is being built like this. That's Caesar.
And part of the sauce, I think, is... Or sorry, go ahead.
And I'll leave this detail with you to see if you want to publish this on the podcast or not. But this has to be a video. This has to go, like, we need to push this. It's trending. It's hot. It's big. It's massive. We need to get distribution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to get our team on it. And one last thing I wanted to mention, I think niching down is the other hint that we can give, because when you build for everyone, you build for no one. Of course, with time, LLMs are going to become better and better and better, as we can see now with Anthropic tackling so many different niches at the same time. But ultimately, if you have a team of 1, 10, 50, 100 people, good luck taking on every single niche at the same time. You have to niche down. You have to select your market and collect data on that market and just stick to your guns.
And let me tie what you just said to the whole spiel on context, because by definition, when you niche down, you narrow down the context. Right? If you target the depth, that's the exchange, right? And I think depth is something all the big model providers, it's going to be hard for them. And I say this cautiously, but as of now, it's still hard for them to capture that depth and nuance. Or you have to build an agent or a customization layer to customize and accommodate for that depth and nuance. That's it. Emergency meeting over.
Love it. We'll leave it here.